He was trying to live out his philosophy with companions, and he, during that vacation year in Italy, he always discussed the idea of founding an almost religious philosophical community in an old monastery or something like that. It was a fantasy of his. I think he did not only see Lou as the ideal companion of that community of scholars, but he was very attracted to her as a woman.
He proposed marriage to Lou Salome, who didn't want to marry him or anybody, and suggested a menage a trois with him and Ray. And then, a little while later, they had another meeting together in Leipzig, and then Ray and Lou Salome went off. And as time went on, Nietzsche realised that he'd been ditched. And he was in a fury of self-loathing, and his letters on this at this time are quite convulsive. He says, I feel nothing but contempt on the part of everyone who meets me now. And clearly he had been thrown off of his rocker for a time.
This last morsel of life was the hardest I have yet had to chew, and it is still possible that I shall choke on it. I have suffered from the humiliating and tormenting memories of this summer as from a bout of madness. I am exerting every ounce of my self-mastery. Unless I discover the alchemical trick of turning this muck into gold, I am lost.
He wrote, if I am not able to turn all this muck to gold, I am finished. By muck he meant the state of mind and emotion that he was in. Well, he did, see, by writing Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Zarathustra is a fictional character, but it borrows most of its characteristics from Nietzsche.
When Zarathustra was 30 years old, he left his home and went into the mountains. Here he enjoyed his spirit and his solitude, and for 10 years did not tire of it. But at last a change came over his heart, and one morning he rose with the dawn, stepped before the sun, and spoke to it thus. Behold, I am weary of my wisdom, like a bee that has gathered too much honey. I need hands outstretched to receive it.
Thus Spoke Zarathustra, the book is the work of an isolated man, and it's clear from the figure of Zarathustra in the book itself, who has such problems finding disciples. In the first book, he preaches to the townsfolk in the town that he descends to from his lonely mountain, and finds that they don't have ears to hear him. Zarathustra then is an isolated figure. He doesn't immediately find the right audience. The book is, in a sense, a quest for the right audience, and a quest on Zarathustra's part to realize what his task is.
When Zarathustra came into the next town, which lies on the edge of the forest, he found many people gathered together in the marketplace. And Zarathustra spoke thus to the people. Behold, I will teach you about the overman. Mankind itself is something that must be overcome.
Nietzsche proposes an ideal of self-overcoming, an ideal he calls the overman, not by having recourse to a metaphysical realm outside of the human, but within the possibilities of the human. It's a paradoxical notion, but it's one that Nietzsche is asking us to consider. How can we, as humans, transcend ourselves?
The idea of the overman came from Nietzsche's own battle for self-mastery. Human beings in general, he argued, had a duty to rise above the limitations of their own condition. But the original German term he created, Übermensch, can be interpreted in many ways. It is still often translated as Superman. This is a legacy of the Nazi era, when long after his death, Nietzsche was turned into a hero of the Third Reich. Nietzsche's Superman was able to be co-opted into fascist ideology because of the activities of his sister Elizabeth, who re-edited some of her brother's writings to promote the Aryan ideal.
Übermensch dürfen wir nicht verstehen als im Sinn, wie es die Nationalsozialisten missverstanden haben, die ja durch Nietzsches Schwester Nietzsche als ihren Ideologen eigentlich, geistigen Vater für ihre Rassentheorie als Grundlage angenommen haben. So ist Übermensch nicht zu verstehen. Übermensch heißt überwinden, einen neuen Weg suchen, nämlich auf den Weg ohne diese göttliche Figur, die mich hindert am Leben, sondern der Mensch, der in völliger Freiheit neue Wege sucht und in diesem Sinn gottlos ist.
If you translate Superman as the overman, which some people do, the Übermensch, the mountains were in a sense the overworld. They represented for Nietzsche a place of self-transcendence. And their opposite was the land down below, ordinary life, common life, that which had to be transcended.
I am a wanderer and a mountain climber, Zarathustra said to his heart. What returns, what finally comes home to me is my own self. Alas, I have begun my loneliest walk. But whoever is of my kind cannot escape such an hour. The hour which says to him, only now are you going your way to greatness. Peak and abyss, they are now joined together. For all things are baptized in a well of eternity and lie beyond good and evil.
In conceiving of a world beyond good and evil, beyond the fleeting preoccupations of the human condition, Nietzsche had transcended the muck, as he called it, of his own life experience and turned it into philosophical gold. But now, living virtually in total isolation in Sils Maria, he had all but sacrificed human contact for the world of his own imagination. Philosophy had become his consolation for a life of disappointment and deep-rooted loneliness.
My principal article of faith is that one can only flourish among people who share the identical ideas and the identical will. I have no one. That is my sickness. If, adopting a popular manner, I recommend Schopenhauer or Wagner to the Germans or conjure up Zarathustra's, these are my remedies. Above all else, they are hiding places where I can lose myself for a time.
But even for Nietzsche, such extremes of isolation eventually took their toll. In 1888, he moved down from the Alps to the Italian city of Turin, echoing Zarathustra's descent from his solitary mountain. Having, as he saw it, liberated humanity from its past, Nietzsche now set about redefining its future. He began formulating a new system of values for a society in which God was no more, a new morality beyond Christian virtues such as self-denial and pity. He called this project, which he hoped would be his crowning achievement, the transvaluation of all values.